Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Peter Ciurczak, and I'm the research analyst at Boston Indicators. And I'm joined today by Sylvia Stewart of the Institute for Economic and Racial Equity at Brandeis University. And we're here today to talk to you about national wealth trends and the challenges of local data. So take it away, Sylvia.
Thank you, Peter. So, why do we care about wealth? Well, income is like a stream. It flows by. You can collect what you need from it at any one moment, but if it runs dry, you'll be left thirsty. Wealth, on the other hand, is like diverting that stream into a reservoir. If the stream runs dry, you'll still have plenty to drink. If your water needs increase, you have that backup resource without needing to worry about conditions in the moment. But access to wealth means so much more than security against hard times. Wealth determines where you live, the quality of the schools your children attend, and even whether you'll have comfortable care as you age. Both in Massachusetts and in the nation as a whole, there's been growing recognition of troubling wealth disparities based on race, ethnicity, income, and education. To provide a baseline overview of these dynamics, we're going to walk you through a selection of the best existing data on racial wealth inequity. I'll start by giving you some top-line data about wealth inequality and the national level from the Survey of Consumer Finances. But first, it might help you understand how we measure wealth. Simply put, your net wealth is your assets minus your liabilities. Your assets include things like your home equity, your car, any kinds of stocks and bonds in your retirement accounts. And your liabilities really include all of your debts, so student loans, credit card debt, medical debt, and anything else. As you can imagine, age plays a significant role in wealth accumulation because for most people, your salary grows as you age. This can have some minor impact on wealth trends nationally. So let's actually dive into the national data. Since 1992, wealth disparities have grown dramatically. In 1992, the top 1% of earners had about 50 times the wealth of your average household. But today, the top 1% has 90 times the wealth. In fact, the top 1% owns so much more wealth that it's hard to even make charts that show the detail of wealth trends of anyone who owns less than the average. So let's actually zoom in. As you can see, wealth of families living at the median took a big hit with the 2008 recession, but are up slightly since 1992. However, the families with the least wealth at the 25th and 10th percentiles are actually worse off than they were 30 years ago. And in the United States, economic inequity is inextricably connected to growing racial inequity. By 2019, white wealth was almost 9 times as high as Black wealth and 5 times as high as Latino wealth. For centuries, policies have been created to ensure that people of color, especially Black and Indigenous people, were and continue to be excluded from wealth-building activities. When wealth was created in communities of color, far too often it was destroyed. A sizable amount of land owned by Black, Indigenous, and Latino landowners at the turn of the 20th century was expropriated through violence, predatory lending, and outright discrimination from the USDA and other federal agencies. White citizens killed their successful Black neighbors in horrors like the Tulsa Massacre. Later, urban renewal policies undermined Black and Latino communities in cities across America. Racial and ethnic wealth disparities are much higher than income disparities. The median white household earns about 1.7 times more than the median Black household, but has about 9 times the wealth. As these two charts show, while the income divide has narrowed a bit since 1992, the wealth divide has grown. Now, imagine for a second if you were to ask every household in the US to line up from the lowest income to the highest income, and then you were to divide them into 4 equal groups. Those are called quartiles. This chart shows the median wealth of each of these income quartiles by race. Now, as we know, income is highly correlated with wealth. In every racial group in this chart, the highest 25% of earners have significantly more wealth than earners in the other quartiles. But the highest quartile of white earners has 3 times the wealth of the next highest. And the highest quartile of Black earners has 4.4 times the wealth of the next highest. The highest quartile of Latino owners has about 3.95 times the wealth of the next quartile. More disturbing, though, are the gaps between white, Black, and Latino households. The highest earning white households have about twice the wealth of the highest earning Black households and about 3 times the wealth of the highest earning Latino households. In fact, white households in the second quartile have a higher median wealth than Black and Latino households in the third quartile. As you can see, education is heavily related to wealth, but only really for those who get bachelor's degree or more. But these returns are unequal. The net wealth of white college graduates in 2019 was about 5.6 times greater than the wealth of Black college graduates, and about 3.5 times larger than the wealth of Latino college graduates. What's more, Black and Latino college graduates had less wealth than white households with just a high school diploma. Black college graduates have little more wealth than white households with no high school diploma, about $4,200. In some of our own research, we found that large wealth gaps between Black and white workers exist within high demand fields, especially STEM and finance, showing that this trend is not necessarily driven by degree program choice. So then, why do we see wealth accumulate differently in Black, white, and Latino households, even where there are similar income and education levels? One likely factor is that Black and Latino families often utilize their financial resources to support their parents, likely due to the financial precarity of older generations. While white families often receive financial support from their parents for those big life moments, like buying a home or getting married. At every income level, Black and Latino households provide more support to and receive less financial support from their parents. Black households with the highest incomes provide more financial support to their parents than any other group. Financial transfer trends are particularly striking among Latino households. They receive less financial support at every income level, but the lowest income Latino households provide financial support to their parents at incredibly high rates. Now, Peter, I'm going to turn it back over to you to talk about some of our local data.
So thank you, Sylvia. Now, with the best national surveys limited at a local level, a couple of novel research efforts have attempted to fill the void. Now, I'll show data from 2 of them in the next 2 slides. The best known of these is data provided by the 2015 Color of Wealth in Boston report. The second I'll show is a new data effort from the Urban Institute. So let's begin with the Color of Wealth. Run out of the Boston Fed, this survey was more limited than national wealth surveys and focused on just a small sample of families region-wide to estimate net worth. This involved individual interviews on assets and debt, though these were far less detailed than national surveys. The next slide will show a table with some example information generated from that survey. Now, you can see here that it generated estimates of a Black-white racial wealth gap far wider than national estimates from the Survey of Consumer Finances. Here in Greater Boston, it suggests a white net worth of $248,000 for white households and a Black net worth of $8. Now, these, I must emphasize, are very rough estimates due to the small sample size. But if the estimate were $8,000 or $80,000, this would still represent a significant racial disparity versus a point estimate for $248,000 for white households. Now, the study included not just estimates for some racial groups, but also estimates for a few subgroups, including Caribbean Black with a median net worth of $12,000 or so, Puerto Rican with a median net worth of $3,000, and Dominican with a median net worth of 0. Now, additionally, the report presented data on several key components of wealth, including median non-housing debt and percent owning IRA or private annuity, as you can see on the chart. But there are many more of these in that report. So the Color of Wealth added a lot to the local conversation and really tried to add nuance beyond just basic racial categories, but it is still extremely limited. A different data set from the Urban Institute produced some more novel local wealth data. These estimates are generated by layering national wealth estimates onto local households of similar economic and demographic characteristics. And this work is interesting in part because they were able to provide estimates for Asian American and Pacific Islanders, but these estimates are still very rough. But similar to the national data, they do show large racial wealth gaps. That said, apples to apples comparisons are extremely hard, but there are some differences I will highlight here. Racial wealth gaps at the national level are smaller than those at the local level, and much of the larger gap in Massachusetts comes from higher white wealth in Greater Boston as compared to nationally. Additionally, AAPI wealth is relatively high in Massachusetts, according to the Urban Institute, but some of our own research at Boston Indicators suggests there is a divide between Asian American residents of Boston versus Asian American residents of Greater Boston more broadly. And finally, at the local level, Black and Latino wealth appear similar or lower than nationally, and the big difference is in the color of wealth estimates, Black estimates. Another way we can look at local data on wealth is to use surveys that look at specific components of wealth. Perhaps the most useful among these is the Census Bureau's American Community Survey, or ACS. And the next slide I will show you looks at a graph of home ownership just at families where the head of household is at least 35 years old. Now, because homeownership is among the largest components of wealth for families in the bottom of the income distribution, we troublingly see that Greater Boston has large racial homeownership gaps. Asian homeownership lags white homeownership a bit, but the largest gaps are by far for Black and Latino households. Further, racial gaps persist even when controlling for income. Another important component of wealth for which we have some local data is business ownership. A small fraction of the population overall, regardless of race, owns a business. But for those who do, it can be a helpful vehicle for accumulating wealth. And for this analysis, we focus on businesses with at least one employee. And once again, we see large racial gaps, with Black business owners making up just 1.9% of the overall Black share of the population, and there are similar gaps in Latino-owned businesses. So I'd like to sum up. The US economy is high wealth and high growth, but also high inequality. And in the US context, that means high racial inequality. And here, wealth relates to other issues of economic insecurity, including home ownership, access to education, and so on. And finally, as both Sylvia and I can attest, there are real data challenges in this analysis and in these analyses. And going forward, it is difficult to understand how those relationships exist between and within racial and ethnic groups. So thank you for your time. On behalf of myself, Peter Ciurczak at Boston Indicators, and Sylvia Stewart at the Institute of Economic and Racial Equity. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.